Hello, friends. Welcome to this further journey. I've noticed that a lot of people in their 50s and 60s tend to resist the idea that they're on this second half of life journey. It's like that whole notion might be something they're not ready to deal with. One friend of mine said, well, I don't want to admit I'm on this second half of life journey because it's all downhill to death from there. So yeah, I can understand that sentiment, but I think there's some great reasons to go on this journey. So why do we resist it anyway? And what are the gifts on the other side? Let's check it out. Hi, my name is Jeanette Slater, and we're talking about the second half of life further journey. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about why we resist even acknowledging that we're in second half of life journey. Why do we do that? Well, I think there's a number of reasons. The first is our culture. The culture we are in, at least in America, resists aging, resists anything about growing old. Being young is glorified, being beautiful is glorified. We see it on every page of everything that we view. And so to consider that maybe we're not in that youthful part of our culture anymore, that's a big hurdle that we need to overcome. And then to admit that maybe we're in a second half of life journey, that we are aging, and then we might be dismissed and considered too old to blah blah blah. You you fill in the blank. So that's one of the reasons that I think we tend to resist saying we're in second half of life. I think another reason is because we fear what aging will bring, and we really don't want to talk about it. We really don't even want to think about it. We want to imagine that we're still in the prime of our life, and we are, but in a very different way. And I think it's important that we look at that. And then, like my friend said, it's a downslide all the way to death. And our culture does not want to talk about death or deal with death. We have places that as soon as somebody dies, we ship them off and we don't have to see them again until they're all pretty or until we put them in the ground. We just don't want to talk about death at all. And second half of life can sound like that's where we're headed. Well, the reality is we are, but we'll talk about that later. I keep saying that this is a change journey, and admitting, owning that we're stepping onto the second half of life journey says we're stepping into change. And that's a hard orientation to change. And to say, yes, actually, I do want that. How many of us want change? Plus, if you're like me and you had a great first half of life and you were very successful, well, I don't know if I was very successful, but I was successful enough. It's like if we step into second half of life, are we throwing away all the good stuff that we've built in first half of life? We've worked hard for that. We've worked hard to get where we are right now. We've created the life we're living, and if we love it, it's not something we want to leave. It's not something we want to walk away from. And I know for myself, that was a hard thing because I had a good first half of life. But there were things that happened that said, it's time to look at reality and see where you are. So these are some of the reasons why we all resist change, resist acknowledging that we're on this second half of life journey. And it usually takes some kind of a shock to our system to wake us up to reality, to realize that how the dice were rolled in first half of life may be a bit different in second half of life. A shock that says what was before is not going to be what's after. And again, for a lot of people, just retiring or the kids leaving home, a death in the family, there's a lot of reasons that we get that kick in the pants. And we have to decide, are we going to move forward or are we going to dig in our heels and stay where we are? For myself, acknowledging that I was in second half of life was a huge relief, because I really felt like my world was falling apart. A lot of the paradigms, the truths, the understandings that I had were getting shaken. And I thought my life was just going downhill, literally down the slide. And I didn't know what to do with that. My friends tried to be helpful. They tried to be there for me. But this was a new walk. This was a new journey. And back then, this was 25 years ago, I'd never heard of second half of life. Nobody was talking about second half of life and how different that was, that it was very different than first half of life. So what a gift when someone recommended to me a book by Father Richard Rohr called Falling Upwards. And here is the front of that book, A Journey from First Half of Life to Second Half of Life. And it was such a relief to me to read his book and go, oh, what I'm experiencing is actually right and good. Right and good. That I was actually on the right path. That if I chose not to go on this path, I would stagnate. That this was actually a journey of growth if I chose that. That was a huge relief to me. And I guess such a huge relief that 25 years later, I'm still talking about it because it saved my psyche. So acknowledging that, I started reading up on it, not only through Richard Rohr, but other people were, I found out we're actually writing about it, maybe not talking about it specifically in those terms, but I found a lot of different books that were talking about how different second half life was from first half of life. And I felt that change internally. So having somebody out there acknowledge it and walk with me in this process was just a huge relief and was so life-giving. If we do embrace this further journey, we don't have to live with the stress of anxiety that things are going wrong. There'll be plenty of stress in the challenges that we face, but if we know that we're on the right path, that just makes all the difference. So resistance to entering this journey, to saying, no, I'm not going there, actually takes a lot of energy. And as you know, as we age, we don't have as much energy. So where do we focus our energy? How can we conserve our energy and point it toward the right things? Because we're living longer now and hopefully healthier if we choose that, we really do have a whole second half of life to live. So it's not that it's a downhill slide. We can actually go uphill, as Richard Rohr says, we're falling upward if we choose that. So acknowledging that we're on this second half of life path, I think extends our life. It helps us live more fully in the now. Like I said, if we don't accept this journey, then we end up living the second half of our life looking in the rearview mirror. And if we accept this journey, then we look forward and we start looking for the invitations, we start looking for the opportunities that we have in second half of life. And so that's another real advantage of acknowledging that this is where we are. We can choose not to live in grief that we're letting go of so many things, because we will have to let go of a lot of things. But we don't have to live in grief about that. We can grieve as we need to and let them go. And then we don't have to live in regret. Regret that maybe I didn't do this in first half of life. No, but we still have a second half of life where we can accomplish a lot. We can still learn to love and rebuild relationships. We have so much that's available to us in second half of life. Acknowledging that we are on the second half of life journey is a choice to live in the now. And I don't know about you, but I've heard a lot of people talking about living in the now instead of in the past or just in the future. So choosing this path is saying, I'm going to live fully right now. And I think we can then make better choices that will help us in the long run. Because if we're living in anxiety, we are not going to make good choices. We need to have a clear mind, a sense of positive forwardness. And then we can make the kind of choices that we need to make so that in the future, our lives are even better, clear to the end. So I think it's really important that we choose to go on this journey, which means letting go of a lot of things, acknowledging where we are, deciding to live in the now, and embracing all the opportunities that are coming our way. So no, it's not a downhill slide all the way to the end at this stage of life, especially in third quarter, where we still have a lot of energy, we still have a lot of choices of how we want to encounter the challenges that come our way. There are still a lot of opportunities ahead of us that if we choose not to go on this journey, we're going to miss. So talk about missing things. Yeah, we're going to miss some of the things in first half of life, but there is more on the other side of this. I recently just watched a beginning of a video. I'm pretty sure it was AI generated. It was an older lady that they said was 109 years old. And she was dressed to the nines and she was jauntily walking down the streets saying she was going to go to all the parties and just denying where she was in life. Now, like I said, I think it was all AI generated, and but it was just an example to me of how we can deny where we're at right now and try to hang on to what our life used to be when there's so many opportunities ahead. So I hope you'll go with me. I hope you'll choose to go on the second half of life journey and decide how you want to live. So if you do, put on your walking shoes, then hit like and subscribe to get our channel going. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.